There's practice, which is much more about just this daily hygienic care of yourself that should be relatively easy to stay in because it's self-satisfying. Performance sometimes takes a kind of discipline, self-discipline, maybe scheduling, some much more analytical and somewhat rigid sort, if you want to get the results that performance will give you. Practice is ultimately leading, its only goal is well-being.
Welcome to the Spartan Endurance Series on Spartan Up Podcast with host Johnny Waite.
Hey everybody, welcome to another endurance episode of the Spartan Up Podcast. I'm Johnny Waite, one of the hosts of the Spartan Up Podcast, and I am so stoked today to have Barefoot Ted McDonald. Ted is I call him an accidental star of the book Born to Run. He went on this adventure down to the Copper Canyon in 2006, became part of an epic story of endurance and adventure and anthropology that became a huge best-selling book. And Ted is bigger than life, larger than life, and he has a lot of great things to say about natural movement, natural nutrition, and how to tap into the parts of your body that you already have before you start layering on stuff from the outside. You are going to learn so much from this.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by LORAN oils. After your next workout, help soothe tired muscles with LORAN's affordable, quality-tested, 100% pure botanical essential oils. Visit LORANOils.com, that's LORANNOILS.com today and get 15% off site-wide when you use the code SPARTAN15 at checkout.
Hey Spartans, I'm beyond excited about this episode. We've got Barefoot Ted, who I have had the pleasure to run with in Prague. We were over there for dinner at Petra and Daniel's house.
We've crossed amazing.
Paths. Yeah, we've crossed paths in Copper Canyon. We've crossed paths at Born to Run in California.
That's right, yep.
But dude, I still, like, to me, you're still a legend. I've hung out with you a couple times, but you're still Barefoot Ted from Born to Run. You're still the guy who invented Luna Sandals. I wanna dive into those stories and then find out how that has impacted your approach to endurance. So I want to hear about your life experience, but then how that has shaped your philosophy on endurance. Does that sound like a cool conversation to have?
Totally. I mean, it is I very much look forward to talking on a topic like that, primarily because I can just literally go to rapid access memory in my own mind and probably come up with something pretty good. But
that's awesome.
It's been an amazing journey. It's been interesting having run into you in the different places throughout this time. Of course, Born to Run put me on the map in a way that was probably. It jump-started my career as being able to become a successful, let's say, or at least almost successful sandal maker, but kind of a dream come true. I grew up in California in the 70s when, surf and skate culture was really huge. And that whole culture there was nothing about time, distance, speed. It was about shared experience, and it was about freedom, really. It was about being free to explore and fit enough to do it. We didn't know that you had to be fit. We were just doing it. We were either, out in the ocean, body surfing waves or trying to surf, or we were, jumping over walls and skateboarding, dried out swimming pools. We were incredible athletes. Yeah. And we were like doing it at a time when we just thought that was normal, didn't understand that that was so special. And we were primarily doing it barefooted in the sun with long hair running wild. I mean, and it turns out that those were some of the best times of my life, such that as I was able to reconnect with that kind of lifestyle as an adult. They would always say, when you get older, you can go do that. And of course, then you get older and then you can't do anything because you're so busy doing whatever you have to do. But finding a way to recreate that excitement, that passion, and ultimately that fitness by basically having fun.
I was going to say, tell me a little bit about the in-between part. So, you're a long-haired kid, skateboarding and surfing. Now you're a short-haired man, living life on your own terms. Tell me about in between there, when you found yourself doing it the way everyone else does and found a way out of that.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I've ever done it exactly. The truth is, the character who I am is really
Sure.
been consistent in a sort of inconsistent flow. I mean, up
Sure.
above me, by the way, that's a portrait my grandma did of me in 1971. Okay, I'm 5 years,
Awesome.
6, 7, so, but I still think along those lines. So I've been in that mode almost all my life. I mean, yes, I've had various episodes of whatever, but it's one thing's for sure. It's been one continuous sort of getting locked on something that I think I might enjoy doing, or that I might be able to make some kind of contribution to at different stages in my life, and giving it a shot and seeing what I could do. And I mean, that included, graduating. I was halfway through my senior year. I didn't even have to complete my senior year for credits, but halfway
Yep.
through, I somehow managed to get an okay to leave. And I went on a 6-month Caribbean adventure, basically hitchhiking and getting on boats and living in trees and diving for my food and, all that kind of stuff. And it set me up for a kind of competence
Yep.
that I could, one way or another. I mean, that became kind of my goal. Like, how can I turn the adventure into a self-consisting thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that kind of set me up. At other points, I ended up later going to university and that kind of stuff. I was not going to school to get a degree as much as I was kind of into philosophy and thinking and yada yada. So I went to Berkeley and I studied
Yep.
rhetoric and I studied Japanese. Then I went and lived in Japan for 5 years, so I got ingrained in that culture, and I, was computing in Japanese, and I was playing kendo, and totally dig that. Then I came back to the United States at the start of the internet boom, and I created a few internet companies. I had the auction guy. I was in 1997 one of eBay's first power sellers,
Awesome.
making just all just rinky dink. Then I started another internet. So it was kind of like refining what it is, but I always knew somewhere each of us has something we've gained through our lives that gives us a unique perspective on the world that allows us to find a way to leverage ourselves and others up when we have a good idea that we think we could
Yep.
share and it would be beneficial, like what you're doing in this podcast, for example.
Sure. Sure.
And I've been riffing on that, and I think the biggest one that happened for me was this, when I was and Born to Run captures it so well in a sense, or at least turns it into an artifact that many other people have read. But when I realized that for me, getting back to my roots in the fundamental fitness I had as a kid was the key, and that's when I realized, oh my God! In my case, it was like trying to run a marathon. How do they do it? I felt so beat up. I had plenty of energy, but just had beat the hell out of myself trying to run in the way that you're supposed to at that time. And when I realized that there was a form and a pattern and a style that I already kind of had a taste of, and then of course all these indigenous cultures and the history of humankind kind of dovetailing into it, it became the tool that allowed me to go, oh yeah, this is good for me for sure. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of other people that are going to benefit from at least opening that cabinet and looking in there. Hey, maybe I should sort of learn how to operate my equipment in its default state before I start adding all the various things that I need supposedly to do the thing that I can do already. So
that's an awesome spot to dive in, because you talked about the fitness that existed when you're a kid, and a young man, skateboarding and surfing and just moving. And then you draw the parallel to indigenous cultures where they still haven't fully adopted all the technology that puts us onto escalators and elevators and cars. And I watched a great video of a parkour fella speaking a few years ago, and he said, why do I do this? Well, because I have 2 hands and 2 feet, and most people only ever use them for the keyboard and walking on engineered surfaces. And so the idea that we've lost all of our connection to natural fitness. And most people don't have any concept of natural anymore. There's no natural food in them. There's no natural movement. And then they go and they try and buy the treadmill, or they buy the shoes, or they buy the watch that's going to make them more fit. And I love what you said is, hey, before you start spending a whole bunch of money and time adding stuff, why don't you figure out how to use this thing you're born with? So talk to me about that. Talk to me about, how who you've learned that from and what you've learned in terms of using this thing.
Okay, yeah, totally. Well, first of all, look, the wonderful thing about being a human being is this freedom of self-experimentation. No documents to sign, no line to get in, begin now.
Yeah.
And if you want to spend money on it, why not? If that's your, and if you want to go this direction and you want to go that direction, but in the end, you're going to vote with your time and your money anyway.
Yep.
And what's your goal? And I submit to everyone that at the very least, whatever you're doing, you need to also have a practice or a place where you're reconnecting with the primal parts of you that either have been awakened or not. I used to, when I would do introduction to barefoot running, back in the day when barefoot running started becoming, I realized that it was helpful for me and others. The problem was that it became, particularly with Born to Run 2, it was like, hey, just throw off my shoes and I'm going to be fine. It's like, but my God, and I've had over that course of time, reminding people that in my case, it wasn't about creating from nothing a pattern that had already been deeply inscribed in me. I mean, I like to tell people barefoot running is kind of like a language. And if you grew up in a village in Africa for the first 5 years of your life and you learned a language and then you left, and then 20 years later you came back with a friend who hadn't been there for the first 5 years of his or her life, and within 1 year, you'd be pretty much way ahead of the fella that had to start from ground zero. So basically, that's why I don't really care what people do, as long as they are finding ways to solve the riddle for themselves, because they're the only one who's going to do it after all.
Yeah.
There's no one who's going to help you, man. You've got to become the expert of yourself. And no one else can know you like you can, whoever you are out there. And so I started, working on that philosophy or from that perspective, because it's a good one. And as I started working on that perspective, I did start noting, and I'm not the only one. I actually ran into an interesting philosopher thinker who chimed in very well with my own background in being fascinated by the transcendentalists in the United States, the Emerson, Thoreau, Whitman, these people, back to nature type people, which birthed a whole host of people who many of them made their way to California. And that's why California is such an awesome, there's all this bad talk about California and all the shenanigans. And believe me, if there's anything to do with politics in California, I can guarantee you it stinks to high heaven. But that being said, California is a marvelous generator of value, of allowing people to test, try, experiment, and play with living in a way that no other place on earth ever has. And that makes it fifth in the world as an economy right now. I mean, that's a good way to economic value creating places. What do they have? Freedom, this kind of a culture of getting back to nature, recreation that involves the joy of just moving, surfing and rock climbing. These are not sports with numbers. There's no measurement here. This is the soul. So in terms of that moving and that getting going, and like you said, you had the, I don't say advantage, but you had the opportunity to ingrain some of this as a young man, and we're able to tap back into it. And a lot of people listening won't. And it's not to discourage them, because some of the people listening will have grown up in an apartment building and will have never been an outside person, but want to. And so what would you say as a starting point for somebody who says, man, I would love to live like that. I would love to live like a guy like that. Well, first of all, don't be mistaken. I mean, anywhere where a young kid or somebody free and wild, they're going to turn anything and everything into a playground. Sorry.
Sure.
I can, for me, sewage drain pipes were awesome. Any spillways, roofs, houses, garage, trees, trash cans. Come on, man. Dried out swimming pools, no. You can, anywhere you are, if you get out and start moving around, you're fine.
Yeah.
There are some places that are certainly better. There's no doubt about it. And you can vote with your body and go to those places. And that's the best way to do that. Get yourself fit, strong, confident in your own powers. And then you just go where you want to. I mean, that's what I would tell anybody in a situation like that.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by LORAN Oils. Put your best foot forward in competition and make your recovery essential. LORAN's 100% pure botanical essential oils are optimal for athletes looking for natural and holistic approaches when it comes to wellness and supporting performance. Spartans, are intense workouts burning you out? You can give your mind and body self-care and rest with LORAN's essential oils. As you train, stretch, and meditate, use their 100% pure botanical oils in diffusers, roller balls, massage oils, or lotions. Help boost overworked muscles and promote relaxation and focus so you can crush your race day goals. LORAN's origins are in pharmacy, and they have been a trusted supplier for over 50 years to home consumers, spas, massage therapists, and personal care manufacturers, always offering essential and base oils, waxes, and natural butters at affordable prices. Their quality-tested oils are obtained through cold press or steam distillation. There's no alcohol, added solvents, or other diluting agents. LORAN's essential oils are perfect for your active rest days, or for baking and cooking for your plant-forward needs. Their food-grade oils can add great flavors and great aromas to your favorite nutritious recipes as you fuel up, train, and recover. Remember, you can save 15% off site-wide with your next purchase. Just use the code SPARTAN15 at checkout. Go to LORANOils.com. That's LORANNOILS.com. And don't forget to use that code SPARTAN15.
So one of the big things there is just movement, right? Like the idea about just get moving. You know, everyone's waiting to save up for that gym membership or whatever else, as opposed to, and there's nothing wrong with that, but as opposed to, why don't you just move more? So tell me about your day to day now, and what keeps you moving. I love by the way your one wheel. I know that's one way you move. Tell me about what keeps you fit, and I mean go.
It's really simple. And matter of fact, the strategy, I've really been thinking about this a lot. I just turned 57. I want to be able to, by the time I'm 60, really be able to say what I think about these things. So this is thank you for giving me the opportunity, Johnny.
Yeah.
So, first of all, I'm working on this concept of I'm a microdose exerciser.
Sure.
And what I'm trying to get at with that is I've been this way for a long time now. I'm looking for what is the smallest dose that gives me the greatest benefit. In other words, if you could literally feed yourself exactly what you needed, wouldn't that be great? If you could just do exactly and what I mean by ultimately that means you're getting to the point where you can self-proclaim that I feel happy and healthy. So what do I do to that? I look for what's the smallest dose that gives the best result, because then you know where your dosage is. Sure. And it turns out it doesn't take a lot, not at all, if you do it well. So I focus on quality, first of all, quality of movement, quality of being there while I'm doing it. So there is a lot of barefoot movement in my day. I have voted with my body to Santa Barbara, so I live in a place where each and every time after I'm done doing some computer work, I'll be doing something. Not a lot and not hard. For example, a lot of my running these days is, believe it or not, nose breathing. Sure. I'm starting to calm, pull it down. And instead of seeing how quickly I can wear myself out, I'm trying to see how long I can. I literally practice the attitude that I'm going to have all the time when I'm going to be running Leadville this August. So in other words, it's going to be about preserving. It's just this almost like as calm as you can get and still be in some sort of state that's clearly moving forward. I like finding that balance where I'm not going to beat myself to the finish line in life or in a race. Rather, I'm going to get so involved and enthralled in the dance of it all, breathing and happily skipping and moving, let's say, to some degree through that. And ultimately, that's been the secret, I would say, of the kid and his or her fitness capacity, is because they're having fun.
Yep.
It's not like, I mean, it's not like they're in a military. I mean, there are situations like this where, you know, everybody. I didn't grow up in the thing where I did play baseball and things like that, but mostly it was about escaping from the adult control of what we have to do and playing until we figured it out on our own. That's what I think everybody has to do.
Well, and now that most of the people listening are adults, I liked what you said before about the idea. People complain that there's no user manual that comes with our body, but there really isn't much of a rule book either. So the idea is the only person you need to ask permission to start behaving more free and behaving more naturally and behaving more like a kid is yourself. You know, you're the adult that needs to give you permission to go do that thing. I saw a great thing. It was somebody said, I don't want my epitaph to be, he would have had a great life, but people wouldn't let him. Right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, I think that self-empowering element of it is ultimately the key. I really do. Whatever it is, you know, and then furthermore, look at the kind of communication. I mean, you can find your own niche. You can start asking your own questions. You can find inspiration through, you know, things like podcasts and other things. You can find what resonates with you and investigate it.
Sure.
And you know, and this is the only way forward. There is nothing else that's going to, well, you can just sit around and hope and wait that somebody will deliver the package that'll have the answer for you. And maybe there are going to be little bits and pieces like that. But ultimately, so back to my just daily life, really, and this is where it's going to all dovetail together right now with this one character that I found and I've become an expert on now named J. William Lloyd. He was like the next iteration of a transcendentalist philosopher, exercise philosopher. He was like a non-drug doctor. It's an interesting story. But he wrote a treatise, something about running in the 1890s, and he basically wrote some other writing about how to get healthy when you're, you know, starting to live in cities. He was near New York City. And he was seeing this, getting back to your childhood, you know, if you were lucky enough to run wild. And I think most kids can do that even wherever they are. They figure it out.
Sure.
But also indigenous cultures. And he was comparing how fit they can be in that state and then trying to talk about how we could do the same thing. And he really did. He ultimately came to the conclusion that running in a particular way, in a particular style, could be the greatest tool to get the results you might be looking for as far as just getting that right. It was called a hygienist. Just get that right dosage of whatever it is each day, breathing, moving, whatever. So I'm telling you, although I do all kinds of different things, as you know, like skateboarding, solo wheeling, high wheel bicycling, smash balling with I mean, it's all these activities and doing different kinds of yoga things. Nothing is in some kind of set table. There's no chart. I don't keep any times, distances. It's more, and this is where I was listening to Brian McKenzie recently, and it really got me thinking. It's more along the lines of a practice of like some things that I just do in my daily life that are feeding me clearly and keeping me at the fitness level that I want to be at in the health and not taxing me. Sure. As opposed to performance, which it has its own value, but it's not the only game that you can play.
Sure.
There's practice, which is much more about just this daily hygienic care of yourself that should be relatively easy to stay in because it's self-satisfying. Performance sometimes takes a kind of discipline, self-discipline, maybe scheduling, some much more analytical and somewhat rigid sort if you want to get the results that performance will give you. Practice is ultimately its only goal is well-being.
Sure.
Its only real goal is well-being and health time. Instead, you know, how long can you keep, and that's why I think the training that I do for Leadville, the 100-mile trail race, you know, above 10,000 feet above sea level, is how to get into, even with light training, like I'm talking like 10, 20 miles a week, something like that. Yeah. A lot of hiking and other things, a lot of other things, but still being able to go, and because of experience and, you know, I built this inertia into the system. Yeah, that's the other thing. Little light trainings regularly and joyfully in a practice if you're really looking for endurance, that's one other strategy to build a kind of inertial by just doing it, and it's joyful, spending more time in that space where you're in the orange zone. You're not in the red zone. You're just riding that wave of where you're just right on the edge, but you can. I love that. And then being able to go, and I'll see. I'm really undertrained for Leadville this year. Oh my God.
You've just tapered for a long time.
Yeah,
but
tapered.
But what you said there about the idea that building that joy into it and building inertia through joy, and that's something I've seen a lot of people. They get consumed with the idea of endurance. They get consumed with the idea of fitness. And so they go so hard at it, and it's totally goal oriented, and they're going to work so hard. So of course they're going to get there. And long before they get there, they stop because there's no fun, there's no joy, there's no immediate result, as opposed to building up that, like you say, the practice, because the practice can always be tapped into for eventual performance. It's going to give you the baseline, everything else. Whereas if you're just going hard after the performance, first of all, you're not going to get the results you want. And second of all, it's going to be very discouraging. And then you don't even pursue the practice because it was all about performance. So I love your idea that, it's sort of like, and you use the yoga example. I mean, doing yoga every day gently will eventually make you wonderfully strong and flexible and supple and all those things. Doing yoga really hard, like just hard, is not going to get you there. So, hey, I want to dive into two more topics, and we're actually going to come back to do it. And I want to talk about specifically barefoot running, because that's what you're famous for. But I also want to talk to you. You've talked a lot about what you should ask your body to do, which is phenomenal. And that's this episode. I want to do another episode about what are you putting into your body to allow it to do these things. So we're going to park here. I'm going to thank you very much for this. And then we're not even going to change shirts. When we come back, it's going to be you and me just talking more, and people are going to tune back in. Cool. And in the old days, we used to pretend we'd change shirts and hats and everything else. We look like we were somewhere else.
Nice. Dude, whatever you got to do to keep it fun, man.
Exactly. Cool. All right. So we're coming back with Barefoot Ted. Thank you so much for this first one, Ted. You're awesome. If people want to find out more about you, what I was going to say is I believe on your website, there actually is in the top right corner a build your own perfect sandal. And that's right. But when people want to find out more about Barefoot Ted, more about Luna Sandals, give me your website and your socials so they can do the deep dive.
Okay, well, barefootted.com gets to a place that at least you'll know that I'm there and I'm in charge of that. I've been terrible on the social media this summer, being so busy on customer service, but Barefoot_Ted on Instagram. I think there's some cool stuff there now and again.
Yeah.
And lunasandals.com, of course. Go check it out. I mean, I'm sure everyone's heard of it, but probably a goodly number, but you should check it out. It's a cool sandal company, and I think it is a good artifact to add to your new practices, amigos.
This episode of Spartan Up is brought to you by LORAN Oils. After your next workout, help soothe tired muscles with LORAN's affordable, quality-tested, 100% pure botanical essential oils. Visit LORANOils.com, that's LORANNOILS.com, today and get 15% off site-wide when you use the code SPARTAN15 at checkout. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Endurance Series on Spartan Up Podcast. Spartan Up is your partner in resilience for mind, body, and spirit. We're here 3 days every week. Tuesdays, you can find Joe DeSena, founder and CEO of Spartan, interviewing biohackers, business leaders, authors, and athletes. Thursdays and Saturdays, catch episodes from our DECA, Endurance, Trail, Combat, and LaRuta series. Do you know someone who needs a little nudge? Maybe they could use some motivation, tactics to be stronger, healthier, happier, more successful. Tell them about our show. And if you're watching on YouTube, leave us a comment. We want to know who's watching and who's listening. Thanks. See you next time.